I tell people COVID is a simulation of retirement. Yeah, this is basically how retirement is going to be for you when you turn 75 or 80 or whenever it is.
Uh,
I think that's how you should see it. And if you haven't really saved up for this, or obviously if you're young, obviously it's not really matter. But if you're say 30s or 40s or 50s, I think if you haven't saved up for it, it's a good point for you to think about start saving. Because the earlier you do, as I said, the better it is for you for the long run.
Pratik, thank you for joining today. I'm very excited to be talking to you for two reasons. One, we want to understand investing and money right now because money has become more and more visible or invisible in our lives at the moment, and we can get some tips and learnings from you. And second is, you know, understanding more in terms of where do you see young millennials and young people, where do you see that where should they be focusing? But let's begin with you first. Let's get to know you better. So tell me, before heading the passive funds in Motilal Oswal Asset Management, what were you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Shraddha. Thank you for having me. Look forward to having a great conversation. So before, obviously, so I started. Before I was heading passive funds at MOMC, I was actually not in India. I was working and studying abroad. I left my house very very early at the age of 16 or 17 years old, and I've pretty much been going back and forth. I've lived in multiple continents. So I've lived in the UK, lived in the US twice, East as well as West Coast, for a little bit in Hong Kong. So have a little bit of a global experience. But before this, I was actually working in a very fast growing tech startup in Silicon Valley. It was actually a lot of fun. I never expected it to be so much fun, but we ended up growing very quickly. What we were basically doing is, creating these investment solutions for advisors in the US. So a very niche product, but it ended up scaling up very quickly. I think when I started, we were like 4 or 5 people, and we were managing around 30 to 40 million dollars. We went up to almost $500 million in a year and a half. So we grew very quickly, grew our team to like 25, 30 people, and also went to that entire Silicon Valley sort of route. Went into Y Combinator, took money from VC investors, all of that. So
Uh,
that was a lot of fun. What I realized is that the VC industry is actually much smaller than what most people feel. So I think that was a big learning out there. And again, I think in addition to my more traditional experience, so first half of my 20s, I worked in more traditional finance, investment banking, private equity, and second half in sort of technology. So hopefully I can combine the two now.
you head passive funds at Motilal Oswal. Tell me about passive funds and give us an understanding of mutual funds and more so, Pratik, in the context of today.
So passive funds are instruments that are actually very popular in other parts of the world. So in fact, I was talking about my previous company. We were actually creating solutions on top of passive funds. That's when I actually discovered the scalability of these products. And when I came back to India, I think that was around a year and a half ago, I realized that there is not a lot of market for passive funds today, not a lot of interest. People don't really know what they are. So I think that's how I sort of went out there and creating these products. But essentially, what they are is actually, passive funds are a lot more simpler products to invest in. So today, if you look at the complexity in the Indian mutual fund landscape, is actually quite high. We
Yeah.
had the first mutual fund in the 1980s, and now you have like, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 mutual funds. You have these acronyms: AIF, PMS, ETFs, REITs. So the investing landscape has become a lot more, I would say, it's much harder for you to figure out what to do in that landscape. So passive funds make it a lot easier. So you have those 10,000 options. By just having a passive fund in your portfolio, you're taking that 10,000 and coming and making it come down to say maybe 5 or 10 options. So I think, and
Uh,
in terms of effectiveness, they're honestly as good as any other funds out there. They're also very low cost. Basically, you are saving a lot more money in fees, which I think today a lot of people are talking about. But essentially, just to define what they are, so there are two styles of investing. One is called active investing, and the other one is called passive investing. In active investing, which is obviously the more prominent one in India, you're basically giving your money to a professional to manage
uh,
it for you.
hmm,
He's called a fund manager,
hmm,
and basically, and he charges you 1 to 2%, whatever it is, every year, and he takes a call about which stock to buy, which stock to sell, all of that. So
hmm.
in passive investing, it's actually the not opposite, but basically you're not relying on a fund manager. You're basically putting your money into something called an index. The popular words that a lot of the users will know about is Sensex and Nifty. They're
Yeah.
basically indicators of how broader markets perform. So ideally, what you're doing in an index fund is trying to replicate the returns of that broader market. So if the Sensex, if you're invested in, say, a Nifty-based fund or a Sensex-based fund, then if the Nifty goes up by 10%, your portfolio will also go up by 10%. So I think it's a lot more transparent, a lot more simpler. Obviously, I think the reason why it's quite popular, at least in the developed world, is because people have realized that I think simpler products tend to be a lot more effective than more complex products, which is why they're very popular. And I think they are getting a lot more popular in India as well.
How do people get to know about if it is simple? Then at least people like me who are actually scared of all the financial terminologies, and I'm sure there'll be many like me. How do people get to know about
Yeah, I think So I'm trying my best to raise awareness for passive funds.
it?
So I think there's not a lot of proponents, at least in the investing world, for passive funds. It's because it's so. I think the first step is to actually figure out why you should invest. So I think that is the number one question. Most people feel that they should invest because of goals or because of retirement. I think that is secondary. The most important reason why I invest is because of inflation. Inflation has destroyed a lot of value. Money sitting in a bank account today will make you poorer and poorer every year, because especially in metropolitan cities, inflation tends to be a lot higher. So I think number one thing is to actually conclude that, boss, I need to invest. I need to make sure that I need to invest to make sure my savings or my purchasing power capacity is maintained over my lifetime. I think second is to obviously figure out what to do. I do think that when you're looking at mutual funds, I think there's two typical options. One is either you can buy stock or you can buy mutual funds. What at least I've learned is that buying stocks is extremely difficult, and trading itself is something which, I don't recommend. I think trading is bad for your wealth. Not many people make money of trading. I think there's a saying that money normally goes from the impatient to the patient. So I think mutual funds end up becoming the best, vehicle for your long-term investments. And within mutual funds, I think passive funds can be a simpler, I would say, avenue where you can, put your money for long-term purposes.
Yeah, Pratik, now that you said that putting money in the bank might not be the best thing, is like, this budget or last budget, the FD rates have anyways come down, right? Like
Yeah.
earlier, था कि बैंक में डाल दो और रहेगा, कुछ interest आते रहेगा, and we feel secure. वो interest अब ऐसे भी नहीं आ रहा है, क्योंकि because of the new policy, the new change. Why would you tell young people? Why would you tell everyone that look at investing and look at mutual fund and look at
Yeah.
investing in passive funds?
Yeah. So, I am actually more, I think investing is more important for young people today than I think the value of investing or the value of compounding, which I think is a very important term, happens when you invest early. So I can give you an example. So if you look at Warren Buffett, so he says that I'm a big fan. So if he says that, he started investing at 11, and his only regret today is that he never started earlier. So I do think that the trick is to not investing right, is to investing early. Because if you look at his fortune, just to give you an example, took him what, 50 or 55 years to get to $1 billion, and another 20 years to get him from 1 billion to 100 billion. So I think the power of compounding is something which our minds cannot really, our minds work in a very linear way, whereas compounding is actually quite exponential. So I think the trick for investing is to start as early as possible. I get tons of questions. When should I start investing? Should I invest after I get married, after I get settled? But that is absolutely wrong. Start investing today. And because the money you invest today starts multiplying, starts tripling, quadrupling, maybe 6x every year in the next 15, 20 years. So I think the trick is to start early. I think that is the most important, I would say, point I want to make, which is why I think, young people should ideally, start investing ASAP and making sure that at least you have some goals in mind. I do feel that most people end up investing without any purpose, which I think is not really recommended, because then you lose discipline. You invest and then post COVID, you'll probably forget about it and all of that. I think if you have a certain goal in mind, if you have retirement or if you have certain goals, it keeps you disciplined and it keeps you involved in good as well as bad markets, especially it's bad markets where I think you really need to, I think, hold your psychology and keep on investing.
Money was always a precious commodity, but today money has become so precious, and there is a sense of insecurity when it comes to money, because we just don't know, right? We don't know about the job market, we don't know about what is going to happen. And if today you have to tell to people because we all have very limited resources. How do you think we should be looking at deploying that little bit
Yeah.
of money that we have?
Yeah. So, if you look at COVID, it's very interesting. I tell people COVID is a simulation of retirement. So this is
Why?
basically, yeah, this is basically how retirement is going to be for you when you turn 75 or 80 or whenever it is.
uh,
I think that's how you should see it. And if you haven't really saved up for this, or obviously if you're young, obviously it's not really matter. But if you're say 30s or 40s or 50s, I think if you haven't saved up for it, it's a good point for you to think about start saving. Because the earlier you do, as I said, the better it is for you for the long run. So I do think that for all investors today, at least the good thing is that at least people understand the value of savings, the value of investments, and I also talked about why putting money in a bank account is not really value creative. So if you look at the value of, say, I know Amul butter 35 years ago used to be 2.5, 3 rupees. Today it's a few hundred rupees. I think inflation is quite high. So the only way you can do it is by participating in equity. And that is via, I would say, mutual funds. So I do think that that is a very simple approach. I think as opposed to doing a huge amount today, what I would recommend investors is to have a staggered way of approach. Make sure that out of your 100 rupees of say income that you get from your job or whatever it is, make sure. So what most people do is they end up spending first and saving later. I think I recommend the opposite. If you have say 100 coming in, maybe save 20, 25 of that, maybe more if you can, on say mutual funds or whatever it is. Have a diversified portfolio, and the rest you can exactly what to spend on. I think that is what there's a right approach, and that's how really good savers do. Apart from that, do not get disheartened by volatility in the markets. Markets are can be great, but can also be quite bad. So the idea behind saving is to be continuous, good times as well as bad times. In fact, the value of savings increases dramatically in bad times. So what most people see is that bad times is an opportunity to buy things cheap, which is why I think I do recommend investors to just invest it regardless of. And also, I think it's important to have some sort of liquidity. I think people have also realized that they can't over invest, at all times. I think it's good to have an emergency fund or maybe 5 or 10% of your savings in a liquid or somewhere where you can actually, if something happens, that's always there too for you to go out and spend.
Give us a very neutral, unbiased point of view when it comes to equity investment versus investing in mutual funds.
Yeah. So, so there's a saying that, you either are an investor or a speculator. The problem is in today's, at least people who are coming into the equity markets, they tend to be speculators and not investors. They don't care about buying businesses for 5, 10, 15 years. I think they care more about buying something at 100 and selling at 150, which I think does not work. Unfortunately, I think the only way to creating wealth is, I think getting rich slow is what the motto is. I think, the problem is even our genetics, for some reason go against us. We have speculative genes in it, so it's very hard for us to stay away from sort of speculation and trying to like make quick money. But unfortunately, I've seen hundreds of thousands of investors. We have a huge list of investors with us, and it's not really something which and in fact we openly tell people that most cases you will lose money. So I think what I would recommend is to not like I think what I've also learned is that it's very hard to I think not do something you want to do. So
Yeah.
so I think if someone wants to experiment in the stock market, they should do it with a small amount of your wealth. So maybe if you have a corpus of 100, maybe put like 85 or 90 in say the long-term investing mutual funds where you will not touch it for a very long time, and then obviously you can play around with the 10 or 15 rupees or whatever 10 or 15%, which you can go out there and see if you can actually create value out of that. That's what I would recommend, because it sort of fits both things. But yeah, from history, I think it is very difficult. I don't recommend it, but obviously, and I do think that there is a lot of you call it cognitive dissonance. Basically, people, I think people who are actively trading, they should ideally know that they're doing it more for fun than for anything else. So I think that is something which people should know when they're doing it.
Historically, how have the mutual funds performed here in our country since it started?
Yeah, so last 10 years have not been great, especially post-COVID. I think if you look at it from today itself, I think mutual funds have done decently well, but not great. I think last 5 years hasn't been great for the mutual funds, for the markets in general. But I do think that, obviously there are periods of good times and bad times. But if you look at it from say 15, 20, 25 years, when the markets have done phenomenally well, I think equity is the only asset class, I think apart from gold, that has managed to beat inflation consistently over long-term periods. So I do think that it is a very effective asset class. I also feel the need to diversify. I think you, even if you have India as a country risk, which obviously will do really well in the future, I think it's important to look at global markets as well. So I do recommend investors to have a mix of say India and say US or some other country, because it adds to a lot of I think diversification, lowers your portfolio volatility, all of that. But overall, yes, I think last 10 years have been good, not great. But I think if you see it from a long-term perspective, then I do think that equity as an asset class is probably the best one that you could bank on.
Many of the youngsters and many of the people in the tech and at least the world that we reside in, the startup entrepreneur world, if we have to sitting here out of India want to invest in Amazon, Facebook, Google, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's actually become a big trend now. So in fact, so we have benefited because we have some funds which help investors invest abroad. But I think a lot of investors are coming in for the wrong reasons. So as I said, a lot of investors are coming in because they feel they can get 30%, 40%, 50% returns, which has happened over the last 3 or 4 years, which I do think that they will be disappointed. So yes, that is something which is great if you are doing it as a means of diversification. So if your means of adding to your India portfolio, so if you want to add say 10 to 15 or 20% of your equity portfolio, then it makes perfect sense to make sure you keep it stagnant for a long time. But if you're looking to sort of trying to chase the growth that has happened, then obviously at least I feel that you will be disappointed at some point of time. So I'm constantly telling people that don't invest because you think performance is good. Invest because you actually believe in diversification and nothing else. Yeah, so I think yes, there's a lot of interest out there. I do think it's a combination of the right and bad interest. But overall, I think so. I have managed money for people in the US. My previous company, we had 800 to 1,000 really ultra HNI clients, and all of them had between 20 to 40% allocation towards global equities. So this is outside the US. And I saw the same phenomena in the UK and also in Hong Kong. So I think it's not a very uncommon strategy. It's very niche in India, but I do think that in the next 5 or 10 years' time, most investors will have some allocation towards global equities. So I think it's a good space to be.
And how do you do that? Do you have
Yeah. Yeah, so there's two ways of doing it. One is by sending money abroad, like literally sending money abroad through something called like a liberalized remittance scheme. So it's basically you have a few brokers in India who are giving you that option. I think it's a little bit more expensive side today, but hopefully costs will come down over time. So that is one way of doing it, by opening a broking account in the US through a broker out here. And you can go out there and buy stocks. The other way is obviously via mutual funds. You can actually buy any of the global mutual funds. There are, I think, around 35 or 40 mutual funds that give you good access to global opportunities. So I think that's pretty much a lot easier. You don't have to do much. There's no regulation behind the size of investment. It's like investing in any other mutual fund out here. Super easy. There is no disclosures involved, nothing. So it's slightly easier and flexible approach. So you can basically choose between the two.
and if we have to participate in the passive fund, how does one go about it?
Yeah, so for passive funds, there's two options. One is called ETFs, and the other one is called index funds. So both are pretty much very similar. So ETFs are basically mutual funds that are listed on the exchange. So when you buy an ETF, you're basically, instead of buying the stock of say Reliance or TCS, you're buying a stock which is a basket of stocks together that are basically following the Nifty or the Sensex or whatever. I mean, there are hundreds of indexes out there. So that is how you can get exposure to the ETF. You can also buy it through the mutual fund route. So so there are around 10 to 15 mutual funds today who are giving you access to good quality index funds. So in fact, you can buy index funds across large cap, mid cap, small cap, multi cap sector, and also international now. So I think you can basically solve all your needs by buying simpler products as opposed to going out there and trying to choose between like thousands of other products.
But one very clear message I'm getting from you is that for young people today, if you want to make money, then you have to start young. And the power of compounding starts taking place, and you do end up making money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you an example. So if you save at say 18 versus say 24 or 30, say 18 or 30, which is typically 18 is when no one invests and 30 is when everyone invests. So I think if you start at 18, and if you just put 1 lakh rupees in say any mutual fund, and that's growing at say around 14, 15%, then that 1 lakh goes to around, I think 250 times, so 2.5 crore by the time you're
Wow.
55. So 250 times when you put 1 lakh at your 30, that goes to around 45 or 50 lakh rupees. So I do think that that extra like 40 to 2.5 crore comes from investing early. So which is why I really recommend investors to start early as possible. I have seen it. I've been investing for now 10, 12 years, and I think the portfolio is just about to take off and all of that. So I think I think as I said, the trick is to invest early and invest simple and make sure you're disciplined, and you should be okay. I think the discipline part is also somewhat is not really there as much. Hopefully, I think investors who invest, and don't get affected by fluctuations in the market and just keep on investing.
You come from a family of finance and numbers and investing, but you've made your own journey of investing, of learning, of building. If you had to say that, hey, I wouldn't have got these learnings till I did it myself, what would those be?
In fact, I have done that trading when I was much earlier on. In fact, my first internship outside when I was 16 or 17 years old was buying and selling stock, and I bought, I think, Dena Bank or something like that when I was at like 60 or 70 rupees. And I still remember the price. I don't remember prices normally. But basically, I think I had a lot of self-esteem. I thought, I knew everything. I was very overconfident, all of that. And after just 3 or 4 months, I figured that there's a lot of behavioral biases that work against you when it comes to investing. So I think after that, I never really traded after that. That was a great source of learning. The second learning is actually, most people feel that you can learn all this in books, but it's actually not true. It's like learning how to swim. You have to like jump in the pool. So I do think that investors who end up learning a lot, trying to read up a lot, I don't think that is something which I recommend. Go out there, invest first, and at least invest in a simpler product like index fund or any diversified mutual fund, and then you can go with the learning process. Because once your skin is in the game, I think you're incentivized to know more and learn more and all of that. So I think those are the two learnings, at least what I've learned very early on. Third is obviously the power of reading. I've been reading voraciously now 10, 15 years, and I do think that the benefits of reading are delayed and cumulative. So, now I think maybe last year I've realized, oh damn, I've actually learned a lot over the last 10 years. So I think that is third thing that at least I've seen the benefits of. As I said, all three are long-term learnings, so it's taken me a while to learn these things, but at least, I think whatever experience I had, I think it's my responsibility to tell a lot of as many people as possible as to what the correct way is. It is.
You believe in the power of compounding. So is it
Yeah.
like, where does this belief come from? From the mutual funds, or there is more to it?
No, I think it's. I mean, you spoke about it earlier. It's to do. It's actually more to do with mathematics than anything theoretical. So if you just do the numbers, you'll be astounded by how compounding works. And compounding works everywhere. It works in biology. It works in anthropology. It works in finance. It works in mathematics. So I do think that it's a very global. It's a very universal thing. So Einstein said that compounding is the eighth wonder of the world and all of that. So I do think that I think investors who and the problem is that the reason why it's such a phenomenal theory is because our brains can't understand it. We think things of in a very linear way,
Yeah.
whereas compounding doesn't work that way. So I think it's more to do with that. And most people underestimate the power of compounding because they think they can make more money than that. They can make more money than say 10% every year or 12, 15% every year. And in effect, if they actually just see their last 5, 10, 15 years, they'll have realized that actually, what, the best strategy would have just be, buy and hold for the last 10 years. So I do think that I think compounding is good, but you have to give it time. And that is what at least I struggle with, personally, convincing people, effectively, I tell people my job is to tell people not to do anything, So in fact, I mean, it's sort of disheartening because, if you look at Warren Buffett, the last 30, 40 years, He's literally, if so, he has this annual general meet, which is very famous. So you have thousands of investing nerds sort of meet at one point, and they basically have a Q&A session for 9 hours. It's basically two old men talking for 9 hours. Seems very boring, but it is nothing short of that. So I think if you think about that, he's doing it for 30, 40 years. He's literally
Yeah.
saying the same answers every year in, year out, and still no one listens to him. That is quite surprising. So if he couldn't make that impact, I don't know what chance I have. So I think the idea is, obviously I try as hard and
But I'm just saying that this pandemic also brings closer home the need for thinking long term, the need for being more secure in our approach, in the way we deal with things, in the way we manage our money. What you are suggesting is that investing in mutual funds or investing in passive funds could be a very strong alternative to growing and securing your money and future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's 10% process, 90% psychology. So I think investing and waiting, and making sure that you are, I think, invested in good and bad times. I think if you're only invested in good times, then it doesn't really work out very well. But you have to be, in fact, pretty much like a daily, like a monthly sort of putting a money in a bank account. It should be that sort of a mentality. In fact, what's sorry, just to segue a little bit, what at least I've seen is the best investors are the ones who don't really have a background in finance. So some of the most I would say disciplined investors are like doctors, lawyers. I think that's sort of a profile because they don't really understand a lot, so they'll just like what, let me just put my money and let it run. Whereas a lot of people who tend to overanalyze, in fact, this a lot of ultra HNIs, for example. I think not to target them as a group, but they're not really the best investors because they always want to maximize return, time the market, all of that, which I think we've all learned that it doesn't really work over the long term.
Sanya Bandevkar, she's saying, as an 18-year-old, how should one start investing or rather learn investment and finance? What funds are better, active or passive, for a long-term perspective?
Yeah, I think so. So great questions. So I think as an 18-year-old, I think thinking about investing I think thinking about it is half the job done. I think it's good that you're at least thinking about doing it at such early age. I think most 18-year-olds don't even think about I think
Yeah.
most things. So I think it's good. I think keep it simple. I think have a strategy where you're investing in a simple maybe index fund or any sort of good quality equity mutual fund. Don't try to bother with buying and selling stocks. Just buy a diversified fund and make sure that don't put all your money there. I would say keep some of your money in, say, a debt fund and some of it in an equity fund. I think that's pretty much what I would recommend you to do, and make sure that you're investing in a disciplined way. So don't get disheartened when markets are bad. Yeah, and the second question is, I think, to do with what funds are better for active and passive. So they're both different approaches. There's nothing better or worse about either. So when I was managing money for people in the US, now obviously passive funds are all the rage. But if you look at a typical portfolio, it's pretty much half active, half passive. So no one has really won, no one has really lost. I would say if you want to make things very simple, if you don't want to go out there and trying to go out there and select the right fund, which obviously takes some effort, and also if you don't have an advisor, so most investors today tend to be DIY investors, then I guess passive funds are a simpler solution.
Harmesh is asking, can NRIs invest in these passive funds? If yes, how do we go about it, and how much corps would be good, and where to start?
Yeah, so obviously, so I think even NRIs can invest in these funds. There is no really some regulations against NRIs. It depends on where your money is. So if you're investing in, say, an international fund, and if your money is not in India, then obviously I wouldn't recommend it because you're converting your currency into INR and again in USD. But if you're looking at something like a Nifty or a Sensex or say a mid cap fund, then yes, you can invest. There is nothing that's going against you.
Pratik, you had talked about 20-25%, right? Like allocation of the money that you get. So now this is a good question, that in terms of percentages, are you, this 20-25, are you recommending across various asset classes, or are you saying that this should be looking, you should primarily look at one?
I mean, if I said various asset classes, then you wouldn't have any money to spend. I think I do believe in delay gratification, but it shouldn't be too delayed. I think you should have a good life spend. So I think this would basically 25-30% should be highly diversified across different asset classes. So equity will obviously yes, be some part of it depending on your risk profile. And the rest, obviously, you can do a mix of, say, and gold or debt or even international equities. So I think those are the typically four asset classes which I would recommend you build a portfolio with.
Okay, now this is a question. I'm sure many people would have this question. This has come from, I can't see the name. Is looking at returns from last 3 years, 5 years, a good indicator to choose a mutual fund, given how uncertain future can be? Or should we look at fund managers' past performance? What are the parameters against which a fund should be evaluated?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good question, and you should not chase past performance. I think the biggest, I would say, damage the mutual fund industry has done is to talk about the top 10 funds, top 15 funds, top 20 funds. I think if you just track the top 10 funds every year, they change every year. So I think very rarely will you see a top 10 fund remaining top 10 fund over a long time period. So I do think that looking at 3 to 5 year performances, I think hitting yourself in the foot, it's not something which I would recommend. Even the ratings that you see on these funds are based on past performance. So I wouldn't even take the ratings as much seriously. I think, as you said, what you said is perfectly right. You should look at the fund manager track record. And by track record, I mean long-term track record, maybe 10, 15-year track record. You can look at their investing style, investing philosophy. If you understand which stocks they've purchased and for what purpose. I think a little bit of a deeper dive into their understanding of equity and their investing style will help you in a very big way. But I also feel that when you do invest in a mutual fund, don't expect, even though there are times when the performance is really bad, don't like sell those and buy something else. So when you're making investing, if the fund fundamentally not much has changed, then you should just stay invested for a very long time. The funds do well and do badly. There are cycles for each fund. So a lot of investors end up making a mistake of selling underperforming funds and buying outperforming funds. I think that is a huge mistake. Make a decision. Make sure you, I would say, stuck to it for a very long time. Because if you look at power of compounding, I spoke about this earlier. There's one rule for power of compounding. You cannot lose money. And by losing money, I mean converting paper losses into real losses. When your portfolio is down maybe 20, 30%, those are not really losses. They're just paper losses. But when you sell your portfolio, that becomes a real loss. And that's when I would say the compounding formula breaks. So make sure that compounding formula doesn't break. So make sure you don't sell your investments at losses. Make sure you're disciplined and make sure that you don't chase returns and keep on juggling mutual funds. When you make a choice, make sure you've invested in for a very long time.
Is looking at returns from last 3 years, 5 years, a good indicator to choose a mutual fund, given how uncertain future can be? Or should we look at fund managers' past performance? What are the parameters against which a fund should be evaluated?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good question. And you should not chase past performance. I think the biggest, I would say, damage the mutual fund industry has done is to talk about the top 10 funds, top 15 funds, top 20 funds. I think if you just track the top 10 funds every year, they change every year. So I think very rarely will you see a top 10 fund remaining top 10 fund over a long time period. So I do think that looking at 3 to 5 year performances, I think hitting yourself in the foot, it's not something which I would recommend. Even the ratings that you see on these funds are based on past performance. So I wouldn't even take the ratings as much seriously. I think, as you said, what you said is perfectly right. You should look at the fund manager track record. And by track record, I mean long-term track record, maybe 10, 15-year track record. You can look at their investing style, investing philosophy. If you understand which stocks they've purchased and for what purpose. I think a little bit of a deeper dive into their understanding of equity and their investing style will help you in a very big way. But I also feel that when you do invest in a mutual fund, don't expect, even though there are times when the performance is really bad, don't like sell those and buy something else. So when you're making investing, if the fund fundamentally not much has changed, then you should just stay invested for a very long time. The funds do well and do badly. There are cycles for each fund. So a lot of investors end up making a mistake of selling underperforming funds and buying outperforming funds. I think that is a huge mistake. Make a decision. Make sure you, I would say, stuck to it for a very long time. because if you look at power of compounding, I spoke about this earlier. Uh, there's one rule for power of compounding: you cannot lose money. And by losing money, I mean converting paper losses into real losses. When your portfolio is down maybe 20, 30%, those are not really losses. They are just paper losses. But when you sell your portfolio, that becomes a real loss. And that's when I would say the compounding formula breaks. So make sure that compounding formula doesn't break. So make sure you don't sell your investments at losses. Make sure you're disciplined, and make sure that you don't chase returns and keep on juggling mutual funds. When you make a choice, make sure you've invested in for a very long time.
There's very interesting question. Any suggestion for older millennials, 30 plus years, who want to start now?
Yeah, so this advice is actually quite universal. I think for millennials, they have age as a huge. I mean, they can either make use of their age or they don't. But I think even 30, if you're looking at, say, saving for retirement, which I don't know, retirement at 65 is not really something most people aspire to nowadays. I don't think people aspire to retirement at all. So I think investing for say 30, 40 years, then I think the earlier you invest, the better. And if you're at 30, I would say it really depends on what your goals are. So if you're looking to invest for, say, a house or a car, then you have to be a little bit conservative. Whereas if you're investing for retirement, then obviously you can be a much higher equity allocation. So that's how I would do it. So most people feel that the older you get, the more conservative you should invest in. I don't disagree with that. You might be 85, but you might be saving for your grandkids. You might have a house, you might have a good life. So I think you can be aggressive at that point of time. So I think it depends on goals, what you're saving for, and that should decide your strategy. But as I said, this is universal. And this is how, at least how most people do it in most other places, and it's time tested and it's worked.
Simi is asking, I'm 30 years old and I feel I can relate to this. Not that I'm 30, I'm elder. I feel embarrassed to say that I have no financial knowledge. Believe finance knowledge and investing are two different things. How does one educate themselves from financial perspective, and what basics one should study to get hold of investing basics?
Yeah, there's, now with the age of internet, you can actually learn anything you want in the world. So there's hundreds and thousands of courses out there. There's a lot of good books. In fact, the best books are the books which are 20 years plus old. So I would recommend, I think doing any basic class on Quora or Udemy or whatever it is. I think some of them are actually really good. They talk about, and I do think when it comes to investing, look at, I would say, investing in mutual funds, look about asset allocation, look about, so I think those are, how do you look at investing from a long-term perspective? How do you track your investments? So I do think that, I think with the age of internet, there's tons of sources that you can use for learning. As I said, I think it starts with you making the effort. So don't wait for too long, invest first, invest in a simple thing, and then, keep learning, adding to your knowledge. I do think that more than courses, more than a CFA degree, which I think is not really helpful, I think books are very helpful. So if you just Google the top 20 or top 25 investing books, I think you have some of the best books in the world. 95% of people unfortunately don't read them, but if you do, then you'll be in the top tier, and you'll obviously do a great job. So I think combination of books, and I think you have the internet with you there, and obviously you have me as well. So if you want, please reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to give you some maybe advice or a list of courses or whatever it is. So I'm available on social media. So please feel free.
Prateek, you said a very beautiful line, which I have actually, I noted it down. You said that reading books, the learnings out of reading books, they're delayed, but they're cumulative. I have to say, such a powerful, people who read will understand what this means. Now you tell me, if you have to tell me one or two books which have profoundly impacted you.
Yeah, so I think stayed with me, I would say recently, or at least last 2 or 3 years, I think there's this book called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. I'm a big fan of him. He's a great philosopher, writes well, speaks well. So I think that is one book that has, really changed my thinking on how competition is. I think that's one of the books that has made a huge impact. There's another, I think, a book called, it's called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. So it's more of a philosophical kind, but beautiful book. I think you'll feel very calm reading it. And it gives a lot of perspective, when you're busy in all your life and all that. There's
Siddhartha
also
Bai?
this Hermann Hesse. He's a
Herman
Hermann
Hesse,
Hesse.
huh?
He's a German
Yeah.
author. I think he got the Nobel Prize for it. Not sure, but yeah, beautiful writer. And I think one book that really stands out is this guy called Clayton Christensen. He also wrote this book. He unfortunately passed away, I think,
Yeah.
6 or 7 months ago. So he wrote
Yeah.
this very good book called The Innovator's Dilemma, which I think. And what's strange about that book is that when he launched the book, it was actually not very popular. It failed. It didn't really do well in the circles. But then Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, who's also, I think, one of the board. I mean, if you want to learn about management, Andy Grove is the guy you want to be. So in fact, he tweeted or he sent copies to a lot of people, and that's how the book became where it is today. So I think these 3 or 4 books have, at least in the recent past, have made a huge impact. But in investing, I would recommend this book called in The Intelligent Investor. It's a good
Hmm.
book. It's by this guy called Benjamin Graham. He's a good guy. He's Warren Buffett's mentor. And there's another also this book called Common Profits, Common Stock, Uncommon Profits by Phil Fisher, which I think
Hmm.
is also one of the big greats in at least investing.
Yeah. Common stock?
Uncommon Profits.
Wow.
By this guy called Philip Fisher. He gives you a very good framework about how you should buy and sell stock. He has
Oh.
this thing called scuttlebutt, which is a method that he uses. It's very interesting. I read it like some 15 years ago and picked it up again recently.
You're on Money Matters. I want to ask you, what does money mean to you personally?
Yeah, so I think money is for me. It's convenience more than anything else. It's the freedom to do what I really like doing. I think that's what it stands for me. I'm pretty minimalist in terms of how I spend. I don't really spend on anything. I wear very simple clothes. So I think I was subject of forced minimalism. When I was I just to a short story. I went to one of the so my wife got into some of the best schools in the world in Silicon Valley. I followed her there. I wanted to support her, and we were and unfortunately, even if it's the richest school in the world, it didn't have housing. So we were basically crammed in this 200 square foot studio, or I don't know, dorm room, whatever you want to call it. And we were literally like, I think the biggest fight we had is whether she should get an extra yoga mat, which ultimately she didn't, unfortunately. So I think we were forced, we sort of figured that after living there, we're like, no, you don't really need a lot of stuff to live. In fact, after that, we moved houses 3 or 4 times and it was super easy. So I do think that, you don't really need a lot in terms of, I think, needs. So that's basically what it stands for me. It's to make sure that, I have enough for me to do what I like doing on a daily basis, which currently I'm quite lucky to, and hopefully I'll be lucky to in the future as well.
What's the big dream? What's the chase? What's that something that keeps you extremely driven even if the times are difficult?
I think so currently it's more than I think what more than I guess money or anything. I want to really have a life where I can create an impact. Somehow. I do feel that I've managed to learn a lot in finance, so I guess finance is where I am. I'm trying to learn other stuff too, but that's where I guess I really want to see myself making some sort of impact on a larger scale in I think 10, 15, how much ever time it takes. But that's what really motivates me and drives me. Second is also to have fun on a daily basis. I don't think that success is something which I really chase after. I think I'm pretty grateful as a person, pretty happy. So I think as long as I'm happy on a daily basis and I'm getting closer to that goal, I think that's basically what keeps me motivated. I think there's a saying, I think success is getting what you want and happiness is wanting what you get. So I think that's basically, I prefer the second part of that sentence.
You did a startup and you're now going to do a startup. Are you going to talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's coming very soon. So we're creating. So I was previously managing I was manufacturing products. So I was basically launching these funds. The second step about this, how do you get these funds into people's portfolios? How do you create, I would say, allocations with these funds? So I think we're building a B2C app which helps investors create goals and make sure that. So it's basically, investing is two types. One is trying to buy a fund, and the other one is trying to manage behavior. So I think I'm trying to build a company where we can actually manage behavior, because I think that's where 90% of the crux of investing is. So make sure that people are, I think one thing I can do it is by having goals in mind. So once you have a goal in mind, you know that you're saving for something much bigger than you. So it's easy to be disciplined. And second is that, we've learned that, what you buy and sell doesn't really make a lot of difference to your portfolio. I think it's called asset allocation, so I think how you combine your assets is a lot more important than what this fund or that fund. So I think I'm focusing on those two aspects in this company. So it's called Glide Invest, hoping to launch it in the next couple of months. So yeah, hope to get, I would say at least some good users on board so that we can get feedback and build on it.